Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Vinny Costa, editor of Street Muscle Magazine and your host of the RodCAST, the all-encompassing car show where we talk about all things automotive. Today, I'm joined by my co-host, Greg Acosta, editor of Engine Labs and the all-around tech guru. What's up, Greg?
Hey, not happy about this one.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about this subject a few times before. And if those people at home are curious about what they're watching, today's a little bit of a departure from our normal stuff because we're going to be talking about EVs, those evil things, the electric vehicles.
Evil vehicles. No,
Yeah.
I do want to make it clear right off the bat. It's not that I don't like EVs. I just don't like the direction everything is going right now. Like, I think performance potential is there. I think there's a lot of potential in that market. I just don't like anybody telling me what I have to do.
Exactly. That's anytime something's forced upon you, then there's going to be resistance, right? But
is that an electrical joke? Was that an electrical joke, Vinny?
But that was unintended, but sure, I'll take it. I'm so clever. No, but yeah, no. I think that's a long time been the thing, right? Like, people have been resistant because it's kind of being forced on them, right? Like, oh, you got to go green and all those social pressures. But like, to your point, there's a lot of potential to be had. And I think it's the next frontier for auto enthusiasts. But we're going to kind of examine what that's going to look like during this episode, right? That's the whole reason. And this has kind of been on our minds for a little bit. We've been talking about this around the water cooler at the office, as it were, remotely. But, it's on the forefront of a lot of our minds because there's legislation that's being talked about. There's,
Big
there's
press
just
releases.
Exactly. Major auto companies making decisions on this as it develops. So it's kind of on everybody's mind. So we thought, why not talk about it?
Yeah, I didn't quite expect the blood pressure spike I got just discussing it like off the air, like. But
well, we did a little bit of research before we did this episode because, admittedly, I am not an electric vehicle expert, and I don't claim to be. Which is actually another reason that I wanted to do this episode with you, because it was going to require us to do some digging and find out, hey, what does the future of automobilia hold, right? Like, for the enthusiasts, how can you even modify these things? What does that look like? Or are you gonna need to be more of a hacker than a gearhead? Things like that. What's going to happen to our classic vehicles? A lot of speculation. A lot of people like wondering the same things that we are. And some smart people have put together some editorial that we were reading just a moment ago. And so we'll dive into that a little bit. But before we do, Greg, I have a whole list of talking points that I want to go over. But before we get there, how about we get a word from our sponsor? This episode was brought to you with the help of Performance Distributors, the company that allows you to feel the difference, not just ignite a spark. Well, what does that mean exactly? Well, their ignition systems are designed and manufactured under the most stringent of guidelines. In fact, the owner, Steve Davis, told us their systems are designed as if they're running them on their own vehicles. And that's because they are. But one of the products you may already know them for is their line of DUI distributors, the first and one of the best HEI distributors on the market. Their machine calibrated timing curves provide instant throttle response and eliminate engine damaging detonation. Now, for those of you with late model vehicles, their Sultans of Spark ignition coils are based on the DUI technology, so they too can accommodate a wider plug gap when firing out more voltage. So check out performancedistributors.com for all your ignition needs. That's performancedistributors.com. And we're back. Hey, shout out to Performance Distributors. Thank you to them. They're a sponsor of ours, and they make a great product. But unfortunately, the things that they make, they don't have a home on any of these electric vehicles that we're talking about, Greg.
Because they deal with electricity. I mean, they're on the electricity side of our engine, so they're probably in a better position than most. Should some of the draconian legislation that's been mentioned actually happen?
Yeah, man. They are kind of positioned in a good spot, right? They make coils and they make distributors and stuff, so they have all of the materials to put together something that would work on an electric vehicle. But I don't know. We'll have to talk to Steve about that one. You mentioned the draconian laws that are trying to be passed and stuff. We have some talking points here, right? First one that I want to go over, um, and I had trouble nailing this one down because it goes back so far, and that's the history of the electric car, right? Like we started looking into it, and I mean, there's a reason that Elon Musk named his company Tesla.
Yeah.
Although Nikola was not the first one to create an electric vehicle, it was actually a Scottish guy, right, who had patented it back in like the late 1800s. It was like a horseless carriage that was powered by some electric fuel, or excuse me, electric cells that were not rechargeable. So it was more like a parlor trick kind of thing. Like, hey, check this out, a carriage with no horse. But once it was dead, it was dead. And they made some more developments. And eventually they created like a locomotive that was similar, right? And that was kind
I
of a
love
funny
that
story.
story, man. I love that story. How the rail workers didn't like it, so they like just smashed it.
Yeah, they basically like were like, hey, our jobs are dependent on steam power. We need to maintain these steam engines. So your electric locomotive has no place here, and they destroyed it, which is pretty funny. Um, but I saw like some parallels there with what's going on right now, right? Like, so a lot of people are resistant to this change that's happening rapidly. Some would say too rapidly. And part of me tries to see both sides of that coin, right? Like, so are they resistant because they're worried about, um, their jobs and, our dependence on oil and things like that? Or are they resistant because they just don't like these EVs? Like, it makes me question, why people are so opposed to electric vehicles.
Well, I do think that a lot of people just by nature are resistant to change, whether they think so or not. I also think a lot of people, a lot of Americans, let's take a little national pride here, don't like to be pushed or told what to do. I mean, the
Right.
British did it and look what happened. You know what I mean? Like there's a rich history of us being rebel scum, right?
Hey, these
Uh,
colors don't run, boy.
but
No,
so
but
I do think there is some resistance, within our borders, simply because that's like ingrained in us. We You don't tell us we have to do this. Yeah, at least I know for me, you can show me an awesome idea, but the second you tell me I have to like it, that's when I'm not going to like it just because you told me that.
right, yeah, exactly. We touched on that a little bit at the beginning, right? When you try and force someone, they're going to be resistant. Which brings us to like the next talking point that we had lined out, right? And that's the socio and economic and political implications that comes along with this huge shift, right? So lawmakers right now are putting pressure on automakers to go green, as it were, right? To shift to all electric vehicle sales and manufacturing by 2035, right? Um, Even the Biden administration has come out and said like they're going to shift their entire government fleet to be electric powered by what, in the next 4 years? Is that like by the
And
end of his term?
yeah, and we did some quick research. That's a little over a 250,000 vehicles.
And that's not including military vehicles, the car that base staff would be driving, things like that. We're just talking about what, Greg?
That's federal vehicles. So Forest Service, DSS, I'm guessing all the different federal law enforcement agencies. Basically
So
anything at a federal level that has a vehicle that has government plates.
so I could see that sort of happening if they do it, incrementally. Like, let's, shoot for 20% in the first year, another 40 in the second year, and so on. By the end of their term, they want to be at 100%. I don't know if it's feasible, but part of me kind of seems like maybe they could do it, right? But that's not including like, I mean, they don't have options for a lot of those vehicles, right? Like a lot of those vehicles are SUVs. A lot of those vehicles are trucks that they need to do actual work, not just drive around, right? Not just
I'm just thinking Forest Service vehicles. Like, I think of the Forest Service vehicles around here, and the only reason I know a little bit about those is because I always wait for them to come up at auction, because they're usually taken care of pretty well. But I can't see an electric vehicle living where they live and doing what they do on a day-to-day basis right now with what is available right this minute commercially.
I think they're capable, right? Like, the technology has proved itself capable, right? Like, all-wheel drive Teslas can, they do well in the snow and things like that. Their safety ratings are among the best for their class, etc. But they currently don't offer a truck, right? So you have brands like Rivian and Tesla that supposedly are going to be launching trucks, but as of yet, there is no large, full-size truck option in the EV market, and there's also no full-size SUV in the conventional sense in the EV market, save for the Tesla model. What is it, the X, with the gull wings and stuff? But that's really more of a crossover. I guess my point being is that, some work needs to be done. And I think that's going to be the theme of this episode, right? Like, maybe this is a good idea, maybe not, I don't know, but we can say that some work still needs to be done.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, I think, the overarching theme of every critic. Well, I'm not going to say every, because I'm sure there's people out there that just hate it because it's, it needs to be hated. It's new, whatever. I think the overarching theme is that they're making plans. They're putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah. Well, it's something that we kind of glossed over, and I think it's, it's tied into what you're saying, is like, I want to talk a little bit about those societal pressures, right? Are they BS? Like, is that bull, right? Like, and I think I already know your answer, and I know how I feel about it. There's all this pressure coming from the media and these lawmakers for people to go green, but it's not exactly that simple. There's a lot more to it. And I think for me, all that pressure is bullshit,
Well, I mean, I don't really care what anybody thinks of what I drive or me. Like, honestly, I don't. I like what I like. That's cool.
You drove a Focus for how long? I'm sorry. Focuses are cool. I like them.
Well, I mean, after that, it was because I was driving so much between Arizona and California. I bought a Civic, and oh my God, that thing got such great mileage. That was so nice. But I used to fall asleep driving all the time. That's a problem. But anyway, I don't care what somebody thinks of me, because I drive a nasty, muscle car or sports car.
Yeah, this gas guzzling, carbon emitting. Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but we did some numbers, and it's not really that bad.
Exactly. It's not that bad. I think the big push is, like I mentioned before, the dependency on fossil fuels, trying to get away from that. And I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing. I just don't like all the pressure that's being put on these automakers, right? And they're doing basically what they're told, kind of, it seems like, right? And I'm not trying to dig at any of these automakers. They're if this is the wave of the future, then they're catering to that, and that's fine. But to say, you're not going to be allowed to sell internal combustion engine powered vehicles by a certain time, that's what causes worry for me, and I think a lot of people, right?
Yeah. I mean, here's a perfect example, right? Like, you mentioned socioeconomic. Look, I don't remember doing very well. I mean, the fact that I don't even remember how well I did or did not do in sociology tells you my level of qualification to speak to anything on sociology. But what happens? I mean, EVs aren't cheap. In 2035, are you just going to tell, the people who don't have $30,000-$40,000 to go buy a new car that that's what they have to do? Like,
you're asking too many questions, peasant. Be gone.
I don't know. I mean, do I need to start saving my pennies so that I can? I mean, I guess I won't be able to sell any of my Mustangs, right? Because they're going to be illegal.
Yeah, I just don't dig that pressure, man. I don't think it's cool. And I'm not like, like, oh, don't tread on me, and like, I'm gonna keep my gas powered vehicles forever. Like, that's not the hill that I'm trying to die on. I just don't, like, to your point, like, I'm open to new technology, but don't force it on us, right? Like, that's wrong. And along with that comes that pressure, and I think it's unjust because there's still a lot that people don't know about EV production, specifically like the way that the batteries are constructed, because it's not out there in the forefront, right? It's not like the media is advertising a lot of the unethical stuff that's going on.
I'm gonna lay it out there flatly, and I know I'm gonna get flack for this from somebody, but if you have ever said I'm not gonna, or if you've ever had any stance on conflict diamonds, you can't have an EV.
No, but I laugh, but it's true though, because they share a lot of similar uh, traits in the fact that they come from the same parts of the world. The mining that's going on to collect those diamonds is the same mining that's being used to collect cobalt, lithium, and nickel. They're byproducts of copper mining, and something that I found out during our research is that all three of those elements are like linked together. They're in these clusters, and they have to be like broken apart and then reconstructed to make these batteries. And we're talking about mines that are damaging the earth for who knows how many decades from now. And we're also talking about really war torn parts of the world. Places like the Congo, and with that comes some ethical implications, right?
Yeah, I mean, it really does. And I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and preach.
Yeah, I'm not an
I'm not
expert
telling
on the
anybody
matter.
anything. Like, I don't want to be told. I'm not going to sit here and tell anybody. I say the conflict diamond thing tongue in cheek, but seriously, don't be a hypocrite. Like,
Yeah, so those same people who are standing on their soapboxes screaming, "Hey, we need to make a shift to total electric dependency rather than fossil fuel dependency." You're trading one master for another, right? Like, so you're saying, okay, we're not going to be fracking, we're not going to be drilling and damaging the earth and creating carbon emissions, but at the same time, the carbon emissions that are created by those mines are equally, if not worse, than the carbon emissions that it takes to drill for oil or frack or just construct cars to begin with, right? But like I said, that's not out there. That information isn't as readily available as, like, hey, these internal combustion engines create carbon emissions. Well, yeah, okay, you can see that coming out of your tailpipe, but you don't see it coming out of the heavy equipment that's used to mine that lithium and copper and et cetera.
yeah,
And
it's
that's
far too complex of an issue for anyone to truly be knowledgeable on just by reading a few articles. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And a
it's
lot of people like to act like they're authorities, moral authorities or otherwise.
yeah, it's easy to just turn a blind eye to it, or just not even look into it at all. Like, oh, cool, I've done my good deed, I've switched to electric, that's cool. And that's largely in part to due in part to the media and their partnership with lobbying politicians who basically they have a stake in the game, and so it behooves them to make this push for EVs. But I'll quit harping on that. Well, it's part of our next talking point, which is the raw materials, the mining, and the things that go along with that, like we touched on, and then also the required infrastructure, right? So, like, if we really are going to make this push to do it by 2035, what infrastructure is required to do that, right? And because clearly the infrastructure that we have right now isn't fit to support that many electric vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, from the electricity production to the actual manufacturing of that many EVs. Talking to Lewis Black, it was just eye opening. Like, I'd
Yeah,
never thought about the things he talked about.
that was
I
back on
mean,
episode, like, what, 30 something.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I mean, it's
we'll link.
one of those. Yeah, it's one of those things where, I mean, granted, I hadn't up until that point really given EVs much of a thought. I mean, they weren't really high on my list. But when he started talking about some of the nitty gritty stuff, I was just like, oh, I'd never even thought about that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, everybody talks about the power grid, you know. I mean, you know about California and the rolling blackouts and the brownouts and all that, but one thing that has always, like, you know, let's get down to like the personal infrastructure of somebody's house. Like, I have an uncle with a house that was built in the early 1900s. If he wanted to install even a 220 charging station, I don't even know if his, you know, personal power grid would support that. I don't know if he'd start melting all the wiring in his house, or, you know, I don't know that his neighborhood's wiring would support.
I'm sure that there's like an electrical engineer who's watching this right now and they're like, what are you guys talking about? That's not the way it works. And maybe that's the case. And this is largely, you know, speculation. But to your point, like, we were talking off camera and I was sort of playing devil's advocate here, right? And I was sort of saying like, hey, if their goal is to get here by 2035, right? And they start passing legislation that makes it so, and everyone's like resistant, and that's a lofty goal, right? One that they probably can't reach, or maybe can't reach, but they set that goal anyways in the hopes that, you know, we'll start making a push. Then they've succeeded already, right? But what you and I were trying to figure out is what needs to happen in order for them to succeed, right? And the main thing is there's not enough power or raw materials, right? And that's the conclusion that we came to. And then we looked up things like how many gas stations are there in the United States, and there was like 170,000. And we looked up how many charging stations there are, and there was like 70 something thousand. More than a quarter of them residing in California. And then we started looking up things like how long does it take to charge a car? You know, where's that technology? You know, with these superchargers, and so while we're not experts on the matter, we're expert question askers, I guess. So I guess my point is, you're talking about, you know, we have this antiquated system that's not ready for this. What needs to happen? I'm not sure. Maybe somebody can jump in the comments and let us know. But with California having like rolling blackouts, it can be said that we just can't. We currently can't support it, right?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to, you know, electricity, I'm very hesitant when it comes to wiring, like just in general. like when I do any automotive wiring, I'm very slow, I'm very deliberate, because number one, it scares the hell out of me. Because I mean, at least when you're working with fluid systems, you can see a leak, right? How do you see a leak with electricity? Something catches on fire, you know? So I'm not, but the idea of like wiring up a 220 volt charging station in some of these, you know, sub panels that I've seen, that looks terrifying. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, in the research that we were doing, the charging at home is like, that's going to be the most cost effective, right? Like you're reading about the cost difference between using a supercharging station and just charging at home, like overnight or whatever. What was that like?
Well, I couldn't quite get the numbers to work from their article. I think it was Car and Driver. I'm not 100% sure, but they came out saying that it cost them the equivalent of $9 a gallon to supercharge at a supercharging charging station.
And those superchargers still take a long time. It took like what, 2 hours, more than 2 hours.
I think they said 75 minutes from an almost dead battery from in their tests. I don't know. Okay, so I'm not going to speak for them, because I didn't do the research.
An hour and some change, yeah.
But I even if it's not $9 a gallon equivalent, that's still a lot of money. But they were saying that it was significantly cheaper because they did a bunch of their testing at home or charging at home, and it came out to be over a 6-month period or something. Again, I'm sorry, I don't have all the details, but it was like $1,100 cheaper than the other similar gasoline power car they were using as the control.
Yeah.
So yeah, the charging at home is far cheaper than the supercharging.
Okay, so but then, like, let's say we're not quite there yet, right? The point that I was trying to make earlier is like they're taking steps to get to where we need to be in order for this to be a reality, right? So the argument that someone could make would be like, okay, yeah, the charging capabilities aren't that great. It takes a long time compared to gas, but the only way that we're going to get to an equivalency of like an investment of time, like filling up your gas tank versus charging, is if we kind of force these advancements to happen, right? We start taking steps. Otherwise, because they say what invention is the mother, necessity is the mother. Thank you. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? So by placing this goal or this legislation that goes along with these goals, do you think that's what they're doing, or is this more of like just a big virtue signal?
I have no idea. It seems
because we've already ruled out the ethical, high horse that people might be standing on, right? Like, oh, well, the carbon emissions. Well, that's neither here nor there because of what it takes to mine all the raw materials needed to make these EVs. So that's off the table. So beyond that, it's like, okay, so what's the point? Just the advancement of technology? I can get on board with that. That's fine.
I mean, I'm all for new technology. Don't get me wrong. But it almost feels like it's an attempt to progress it unnaturally, make an unnatural progression. I mean, what happened to hybrids?
Yeah. Seems like they kind of got skipped, right? Like the after it was like okay, so the first notable hybrid was what, the Prius in 99 or 2000 was the first one.
Insight, yeah.
Yeah. And those have been largely successful for both of those brands, right? Honda and Toyota. But other players in that market have not done so well. And now I wouldn't even say transitioning away from them. We're just kind of forgetting them, right? So like what happened to hybrids? We actually did some research trying to figure that out, and I couldn't find a whole lot. I did find one article that was talking about basically why Chevy abandoned the Volt, right? And you and I were kind of talking about this, and we were speculating on whether or not what they were saying was truthful or if they were just trying to save face, right? So I'll just read an excerpt real quick. It says, GM's customer data showed that Volt owners simply aren't turning on their gasoline engines all that much anymore. And a Chevy spokesperson, Shad Balch, said in an interview, he said, what we're finding is that consumers are carrying around this engine and driving on full electricity. So basically, the contention of this article was that most Americans' commutes are less than like 40 miles. And in that range, you're not using the internal combustion engine portion of that hybrid. You're only using the electricity. And then it went on to say that drivers were also getting over range anxiety, he said. When GM launched the first generation Volt, there was virtually no public charging infrastructure. And now there are upward of 23,000 public charging stations in the US and Canada. This was written back in 2018. And he went on to say that, the need to carry around a backup generator under the hood is just going away. So, I mean, you brought up a good point.
My argument against that is Toyota Prius. I mean,
right. And when you first made that argument, I was like, yeah, maybe you're right. Like if these statements had validity, then, it wouldn't work out so well for the Prius and the Insight and some other hybrids that are on the market still. Right. But the other part of me was thinking, well, maybe they weren't as invested in the Volt as Toyota has been invested in the Prius, right? So the Prius has been around for a couple decades now. They're heavily invested in the research and development. Um, it's been a great performer for them as far as sales are concerned. The Volt hasn't been around for nearly as long, and perhaps Chevy's just abandoning that technology because they want to focus more on um, all electric vehicles, right? This was a couple years ago, so I think it's fair to speculate that by this time they were already looking to where we are now in 2021, saying, "Hey, by this time we want to be all electric." Um, so I can see both sides of that coin. I can see some validity in this argument, saying, "Hey, if we're going to go to all this trouble, why not just make it an entirely electric vehicle?" On the other side, GM is a huge corporate entity, and there's probably some want to save face for an underperformer as far as sales are concerned. So I don't know. You guys decide. Let us know in the comments what you think.
I mean, I feel like the hybrid technology was never really allowed to fully develop. And I say that because like Formula One has a lot of hybrid technology, right? And generally it takes some time to go from Formula One to a car we see on the road. But that stuff does happen. I mean, that is a test bed. We see it in a little bit in the Acura NSX. I know, still like a supercar, people aren't, not every day, but there was a lot of that advanced technology stuff in there. I feel like this push is ignoring all the inroads they were making with the hybrid technology, pushing that all to the side and just saying, no, that's not going to work. Right. I feel like hybrid technology could have been ready for a big boom, a big explosion as far as what the everyday person sees.
I get that. And when you look at strictly performance, you're probably right? Because you have the benefit of being electric, right? And those people who are into going green, they get that feel good from going green and driving a hybrid. But you also get the range of a gas powered vehicle, right? So what electric vehicles have long been wanting, range, you would have, right? So it's kind of like the best of both worlds. But at the same time, this article is talking about by 2015, completely electric vehicle sales had far surpassed hybrid vehicle sales, right? So, if you're going to go to all that trouble, why not just go all electric? And I think automakers are probably thinking the same thing. Like, look, the goal is to provide vehicles for the wanting masses while appeasing lawmakers who want to go green, and entering and being the first to enter a new market, right? Or provide for a new market. And they do that by creating entirely, electric powered vehicles. So I don't know, man.
I feel like we're artificially advancing technology. I mean, when electric technology overcomes internal combustion, awesome. Because when good technology exists and it's better than, that's a benefit for everybody. When you artificially change that by just cutting out, and saying, well, it's the only option, that doesn't lead to real progress. Competition breeds, progress.
But
I don't feel like they're allowing electric drivetrains, hybrid drivetrains, all that. So they're not allowing it to evolve at the natural pace.
Yeah, it does kind of feel like we skipped a step, but it's kind of pointless, right? Because the whole point was to shift our dependency on fossil fuels to electricity, a renewable resource, as it were, right? And so if you're, I guess a hybrid would be like weaning us off of a gas dependency, right? Rather, just making this push would be akin to ripping off a band-aid and just saying, hey, no more gas. Electricity is the way of the future. we maybe don't have all the answers to accomplish this just yet, but the only way that we're going to get there is if we force it. And I think that's the stance that a lot of these lawmakers and engineers that work for these companies, manufacturers, are taking, right?
But you just said, to use your analogy of ripping off a Band-Aid, I feel like you're ripping off a Band-Aid and it's still a gaping, bleeding wound underneath. It's like, it's not ready to have the Band-Aid ripped off. It's not, you're not throwing your little baby chick out of the nest to make him fly. It's like, he still doesn't have his eyes open and you're throwing him out and he's going to fall flat on his face. I don't think that helps anybody,
Yeah. I guess that remains to be seen, right? Are we ready? I don't think so. Are we going to be able to get ready in the next 13 years? 13 years is a long time. You can build a lot of charging stations in 13 years. I don't know what the infrastructure needs to be to set up to support that. I'm not a city planner. I'm not an electrical engineer. I'm not sure exactly how all that stuff works, but 13 years is a long time. The human race is pretty awesome, and we can accomplish things at a quick rate. So I don't know. I have hope, but I also I'm fearful for the future of hot rodding. Because I do love my old cars, and I don't want V8s to go anywhere. But that's unfortunately kind of what's happening.
Yeah. What's going to happen to our cars? I mean, in 2035, are they literally just going to come and be like, you can't have that anymore?
I don't know, man.
Put it this way. My 2020 Mustang will only be 15 years old.
I know. And I hate to draw this comparison. And we don't have to get really into it, but
I don't like the little smirk on your face right now.
Anybody who follows legislation surrounding the Second Amendment can tell you, some things are taking place right now that are kind of scary for those of us who exercise our Second Amendment. And so maybe, dude, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that question, but it's scary to think about a little bit. For them to come, tell us hey, you can't drive your gas powered vehicle on public highways anymore. That sucks, man. That's a scary idea, but I wouldn't put it past them. But that, we talked a little bit about what happened to hybrids. We don't know really. They kind of just got glossed over. But now we're faced with these electric vehicles, right, that are coming, whether we like it or not, and the performance that they have, right, that you can't argue with the performance versus the emotion that we feel when we drive these classic cars, or what will become classic cars. And we talked about, some of the best performing EVs on the market, basically, the Tesla, versus the most efficient and powerful internal combustion powered vehicles on the market. Coincidentally, one of them was a vehicle you own, the 2020 Ford Mustang EcoBoost. So we started comparing them, and some of the things that we looked at were range, power, technology, and I don't know if this falls into that category, but self-driving. You brought up a good point that was kind of developed before EVs, but we found some interesting results.
Yeah, as far as the self-driving stuff, that technology is going to, it's not there yet. I've seen some very scary self-driving videos, but it's amazing where we are. I'm not going to lie. When I drive into California from Arizona, I would love to have the self-driving stuff. That's not where I'm being a hot rodder. That's not where I'm being an enthusiast. I'm literally getting from point A to point B, and it gets stressful.
That breeds inattention, my friend.
Absolutely, it does. I want to get to the point where on those kind of trips, I can put my feet on the dash and take a nap. Will we get there? I don't know. That's dangerous as hell. But
I think for sure we'll get there. But I don't know. I'm not down with that.
I wouldn't do it now. You see the video of it was just, I think last week, the kid that got a Tesla for his birthday or something.
Yeah, his mom was recording him in the back seat. Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Come on. There's just videos of guys driving in the carpool lane ends and it doesn't pick it up. And it's like,
yeah,
but they're there. You know what I mean? They're paying enough attention so self-driving stuff, I don't even think that has anything to do with EVs. I honestly think that's a separate technology because they have self-driving tractors, right? And harvesters and combines and all that stuff. I mean, that's hilarious.
Yeah. Well, there's some other technology that I'd like to talk about, but before we get there, when we were comparing them, you mentioned driving from Arizona to California. The one thing that we were comparing them on was range, right? So range has always been like the subject that EV owners and manufacturers don't want to talk about, right? Because it's just not there yet. And then the best performing EV on the market as far as range is concerned is the Tesla model.
Is it the 3?
I googled it earlier. Here we go. Here we go. Longest range. Okay, so it's the Model S long range, right? So there's a specific model called long range, and it's a 379 mile range. I think that's a little bit inflated because you did some more researching and found that to be untrue, right? Just kind of like
250 miles. That's a real human being driving. Just like my Mustang is rated at 29 miles to the gallon. I don't get 25 miles or 29 miles a gallon. I don't.
Yeah,
because I drive like a jerk, but whatever.
If they conducted this test like on a dyno or whatever, and they set the speed to like 25 miles an hour and they got 380 mile range, okay, fine. But under normal conditions, 250. Your Mustang, conversely, you say you got about 390 something, right?
Yeah, it's if I go by the mileage of me driving like a jerk, which is basically anytime there's a straight, it's wide open throttle up to the speed limit, right?
Real world driving conditions.
Then I get about 370 miles to a tank, and that's a 16-gallon tank. But on the highway, I still haven't made a trip to California yet, and that's the biggest highway drive I have. I guess I'd be closer to the 29, and that would put me at 450-ish miles.
Right. So we're talking about an added potentially about 200 miles of range, right? Granted, your EcoBoost is one of the most fuel efficient performance cars on the market, right?
Yeah.
The 4-cylinder turbo, right? So historically, a very efficient combination. But that's a huge disparity, right? That's a huge gap that that EV owners need to consider when making that jump, and manufacturers rather. And I'm sure this is something that they've been talking about for a very long time. Their engineers are working hard on. So I'm not ragging on them. I'm just saying, these are facts, right? The range just still isn't there.
Well, I mean, we can put it into a very practical sense, right? Let's take my drive from my house to my mom's house in California, right? It's about 360-ish miles. I mean, plus 1 or 2, depending on which route I take. Where I stop in the middle, I don't have to stop. I could make it on a single tank of gas, but it's in Quartzsite. That's about 150 miles one direction and 200 the other direction ish. And the reason why I think that's important to mention, there's a bunch of superchargers there, right? So that would probably be the natural stopping point for a Tesla owner. I stop, I go to the bathroom. By the time I'm, done going to the bathroom, my tank is full. I'm gone. No more than 15 minutes. And that's with me stopping to buy snacks in the mini mart, right? The Tesla would have to sit there for anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half. Because, I mean, going the other direction, you got to go up a mountain. I'm guessing that's probably not efficient for an electric vehicle. Like that's going to greatly reduce the range. So you need a full charge. It's not like you can start pushing it. So that particular drive would, first off, you're at a supercharger, so $9 a gallon or whatever, it is. So it's expensive, much more than the 259 or whatever it probably is at Quartzsite, because usually Quartzite's a little bumped up because it's kind of a, travel.
Excuse me, you said how much was expensive?
Huh?
You said how much was expensive per gallon?
$2.59-ish.
Don't even talk to me.
Oh, you're in California.
Yeah, that's true. It's like
I do try to
something.
fill up on this side of the border and get in and out of California without having to fill up. Because literally cross the border and it drops $1 a gallon.
Yeah, smart man.
But I'm saying, that practical drive, that's a real drive. That's not, anything crazy, but that is a real drive that I have to make. And as such would affect any purchase I would make for an EV.
Okay. But that's you. Your mileage may vary, right? No, well, pun intended. When we were doing our research, we found that most Americans commute is less than 40 miles, right?
See, that doesn't resonate with me. I've never had, when I was a teenager working at Starbucks, I had a 6-mile commute, but ever since I've worked in the professional world, I've never had less than like a 90-mile commute.
I mean, the longest commute I've ever had was only about 30 minutes one way, right? And now that's about my commute, about 30 minutes one way. So it's about 70 miles a day if I were driving to the office every day. And that's the longest commute I've ever had, I think. So, I mean, I can see how most people, they don't fall into that category, Greg. Most people, yeah, they're driving just a few miles to their job, right? Most people live pretty close to their work.
And I mean, that's the thing. I can only form an opinion based on my experiences. So that maybe makes me not a good person to talk about EVs because my reality is so much different than everybody else's.
This is, and I don't know if we necessarily want to go off on this tangent, but talking about this has me thinking. Throughout this whole pandemic, people have talked about a new normal and what that's going to look like for our society, and people are, ourselves included. Well, you were working remotely before the pandemic, but this is new for me, right? So I've been doing it for about a year now, and I've had to go out of my way to put mileage on my vehicles, right? Like I do quite a bit of camping. I try to get out of the house quite a bit, so I take my truck a lot. But all the project cars, they haven't been driven nearly as much as in years past. And so I guess the question that I want to ask is dude, are we going to start seeing a time where people are not even owning vehicles as much anymore? Are we going to see, ride sharing kind of really take over more than it has? Because, if we look at the metrics, millennials and Gen Zers, they don't own vehicles as much as, boomers and Gen Xers. And they're not even getting their license, at 15 and 16 like in generations before, right? So I guess I'm pondering whether or not people are even going to care about what we're talking about here soon.
Well, and again, this is where, again, I'm speaking for me. This is my opinion, that if that's the way things naturally evolve, then I'm okay with it. Cool. If that's how everything evolves and we end up evolving. Because I mean, I don't remember where I read the article. I wish I'd saved it, but it was something with an architect talking about all the new design houses now have workspaces in them. He was saying we have.
That's interesting,
because they expect people to be working from home a lot more on a much larger scale than ever before.
Well, we've just internally at our own work, we've talked about a hybrid, right? Where people are sort of working at the office, but also working from home, not going into the office as much as, every day, like they were before, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, maybe even less, once or twice a week. And then largely working from home. So, I mean, I don't see that out of the realm of reality, right? People want to have an established workspace. I mean, I have a home office. You do,
Yeah. And I mean, but my point is, if that is the way the world becomes, and it doesn't make sense to not, I mean, electrical for short trip, cool. then cool. That's awesome. But remember, there's still people who have family in other states who need to drive more than 300 miles in a hit.
Rental cars, things like that. I mean, it's viable, man. It's a possibility.
Will it be viable if they throw internal combustion out the window? Like if they outlaw
I think people are always going to want to drive themselves, right? Like, but I think that group is going to get smaller, right? And if we look at the numbers, it's already happened. I don't know. I think it's going to turn the number of people who own classic cars, right, like internal combustion powered cars, into I wouldn't even know how to put it, like a group of collectors, right? Like people who own them, but it's not like their primary means of conveyance, right? It's just something that they have as like a toy or a hobby, or something that they take to the racetrack. Or I think ultimately, you ask what's going to happen to our classics. I think we're probably going to eventually reach that point, right? Like they're not allowed on the highway anymore, public roads, just because of safety standards, emission stuff. And eventually they're probably going to say, hey, you can only drive these at a sanctioned, like event or racetrack. So I don't know, man.
But I mean, and then that brings up, the stuff that, Lingenfelter and GM and a lot of them are doing, where there's electric swapping our cars.
Okay. That got me really excited.
I'm just going to put this out there right out. I don't think I'm as opposed to that as I should be. Like, I think that might be kind of,
I think that was fantastic marketing for GM, right? To partner with Lingenfelter, historically, like a historical powerhouse in the performance industry. So for them both to be working together to tackle like a performance EV is exciting. It's an exciting prospect.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the idea that you might be able to retrofit, like, dude, in 15 years, could my 94 Mustang be running on batteries?
Yes. I mean, because there's already independent companies, like very small companies, that have been doing that for several years, right? Making electric Mustangs. And I think there's another company that makes electric Volkswagens. And I think they're popping up all the time, right? So people are looking into the engineering behind this and what it takes. And the way that Teslas are constructed, right? They have like the battery packs on the floor. I don't think it's, I mean, I've never done it, but there are companies where they set the body on top of, different chassis. So, why not a Tesla? I don't know. But it's funny because I told you this the other day. When I was working on my graduate degree, we had to make a business model, right? A mock business model. And the company that I had dreamt up was a company that swapped electric drivetrains into classic vehicles, right? Obviously, this was just a dream to complete an assignment for school, but it's interesting to see it come to reality, right? So tell me more about that Lingenfelter thing and how they're doing it.
Well, I'm not 100% sure, because when we talked, it was simply, we're doing this, we're going to be the first one, and then I don't think it's done yet. I don't think it's out there. But it's GM has, they call it the E-Crate, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So
we saw that in 2019 at SEMA.
Yeah, so it's just an electrified powertrain swap.
But one of the crazy things that you're not mentioning is that they've mated it to a transmission. And of all transmissions, which one did they pick?
That's why I wasn't mentioning it, because this makes it sound insane. It goes from being kind of a cool idea to what the hell? Like
I
not
still
the
think it's
transmission
cool.
part, but the 4L60E.
Yeah.
What?
A notoriously weak transmission. No offense, GM. I have one in my Firebird, and it's done me just fine because I haven't pushed the power levels of the LS1, through the roof or anything. It makes mild power, and so the thing's lived. Knock on wood. But yeah, to make this like torque monster electric motor to less than robust 4L60 is questionable.
Let's be 100% honest. with the control available in electric motors, they will be able to put enough logic in the system that you won't ever break it. Like,
Yeah.
there's going to be so much logic in there, and it'll live. It won't be like, you won't be shattering 4L60Es like you do with, like, the memes say you do. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I got 4 neutrals. What happened? Okay, so we were talking about this off camera, and I was asking you, like, hey, how do you even modify an electric vehicle? Can you modify an electric vehicle? What does the future hold for the automotive aftermarket, right? Of course
you can modify anything. With our spirit, our hot rodder spirit, you can
yeah, well, okay, so you can tint the windows, you can change the paint, you can wrap the car, you can change the wheels, you can do all those normal things, right? You can even mess with the suspension. Those things aren't going to change. We're talking about the drivetrain of the vehicle, how to make it faster, right? Because that's the important stuff, right? How do you make it faster? And Tesla actually sells a performance upgrade, and it's a software upgrade, right? And it's like $2,000. And so I was curious, like, what? That's obviously just software. Can you change the hardware? How else do you upgrade these motors? Like, what can you do? So we did a little bit of digging, and let me see if I can find this article.
Well, I mean, people have been rewinding motors for more power since there have been motors. Like, let's just throw that out there. I mean, yes, there probably aren't as many electric motor repair shops as there were 50 years ago, but that knowledge isn't gone. So we're going to be able to hot rod stuff. I'm not worried.
For sure. Well, okay, so this article by Autoverse, right? And this is a few years old, but they basically contended that you could potentially install higher voltage cables, transmitting more power, aftermarket computers that allow for specific adjustments, rewound motors, like you said, battery swaps, and even motor swaps. They say that it's all about working with materials and systems already present in order to optimize and eke out as much performance as possible. According to The Drive, in some ways, this will simply be an extension of what we've already mastered, hacking the ECU, the process in which the car's firmware is tweaked by individuals or aftermarket companies to boost performance. So the question that they asked is it really modding, or should we call it hacking?
No, because honest to God, I believe there's far more similarities in the two when we really get into the electric stuff than anybody wants to admit. At some point you're going to have to put in bigger battery cables. That's like putting in bigger fuel lines, right? Because like I'm just thinking about the Windsor in my Mustang right now. I know one of the well-known bottlenecks in the whole system for fuel delivery is the return line. It's too small.
Yeah.
Like, it just limits power. Whereas if it's a Tesla, and you obviously don't have return lines, but if your battery cable is too small and you're trying to push too much power, it'll melt or catch on fire.
Right.
But so, there's going to be bigger, bigger lines. And then at some point you're going to get to the point where the physical size of the factory motor, you can't put more windings in it. You can't put, bigger magnets in it. You can't do anything like that. And that's going to be the same as you've got a factory small block. You can only open it up so much. There is a displacement limit, but then you just go to a bigger block. So you go to a bigger motor housing. There are going to be a lot of parallels that people don't or won't see right now. And again,
well, there's already companies that are like converting the rear wheel drive Teslas to all wheel drive, hacking the that performance upgrade that Tesla sells for $2,000. They're already like doing it on their own, right? Without going through Tesla, voiding their warranty, I'm sure. But yeah, to your point, people are always going to try to find ways to make things faster, more fun, more thrilling. Those Teslas are already wicked fast, man.
Yeah, I think about, it was like back in 2018, maybe. I know I wrote an article and put it on Street Muscle about the the Tesla that was like completely gutted and going out to street races and just hustling people. I mean, that was like a 1040 car.
That's insane, dude.
And he was just hustling people and making money. But yeah, no, the performance is there. the scary thing for me is, okay, can you imagine that if, we pulled the engine, opened up the bore some, put a stroker crank in it. So now, maybe the 302's up to 347. And then all of a sudden that engine were to report back to somebody that it is now a 347 and it's making more power, and they could literally just look at their tablet and go, pew. Nope. You know what I mean? That's the scary part I think about electric. And that's, maybe I've watched too many sci-fi movies, but yeah, everything's interconnected. I mean, hell, my Mustang sends me emails. My 2020 sends me emails. So
that's crazy. Well, okay, so that's something that we didn't talk about, right? So when we were comparing the performance of internal combustion engine vehicles and EVs, we talked about technology a little bit, right? But they're kind of far apart. But in that way, they're the same, right? So your Mustang talks to you. Well, with electric vehicles, a lot of these firmware updates are transmitted remotely, right? Like the Tesla performance upgrade. If you purchase that from a Tesla, well, they don't have dealers, but if you purchase that from Tesla, that update happens remotely and immediately, right?
Yeah, it's completely over the air, right? Like you don't plug anything into your car to update it. They don't like sell you a thumb drive.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even think they probably don't even have USB ports in the Tesla, right? It's all Bluetooth.
Well, I think they do, because I've seen some funny little YouTube videos of people reprogramming the horn to funny sounds. And I'm pretty sure they use thumb drives to do it. I'm not 100% sure. I've never driven a Tesla. I've never owned a Tesla, but I think they do. I think that's how they reprogram the horns to all the fun
for
stuff.
Sure. Well, I guess my point is that like I don't really like the idea of like someone controlling my vehicle remotely, right? Like that's kind of sketchy. Like if you're speeding or doing something maybe you're not supposed to. I like having that freedom, right? Of free will. I don't want somebody else to jump in there and govern my speed or whatever, right? It's just kind of a scary idea.
Yeah, I don't want to get a letter in the mail that says, "Hey, we noticed that your vehicle's putting out more power than it should be. So you've now not only been fined this, you're charged this extra tax, and by the way, we've reset all your settings to account for the fact that you seem to be putting out more power."
Yeah,
it's like, oh, okay, thanks. I thought I owned this property. I guess not.
That's what I was looking for. Hey, that we talked a little bit about the pressure that these automakers are facing. What do you think about some of the like marketing stuff that's happening with them? Like GM changing its logo after all these years to a logo that is supposed to resemble an electric plug or an outlet, and why the lowercase?
I'm just gonna throw this out there. I feel like electric marketing is being pushed to people who aren't gonna buy it. Because like you said, the millennials don't even have their driver's licenses, and it seems like that's kind of where they're aiming. They're completely ignoring the people they should be trying to convince.
What do you mean?
Convince me, like attract me to an electric vehicle. Like I feel like I'm pretty typical of a huge market segment for these companies. Attract me. Spend some marketing dollars to get me excited about your product.
How could they do it? How could they get you to buy an EV?
Honestly, the Mustang Lithium, 6-speed manual transmission. That is the first EV I saw that I was like, whoa, I want to play with it. Like, I mean, yes, they're doing, what's the Cobra Jet, the E-Cobra Jet or whatever, the 1400 horsepower.
Yeah, they also have the E-Copo thing.
Yeah, the E-Copo.
Pretty awesome.
I mean, they know we're there, but I'm not gonna buy an E-Cobra Jet.
Right.
I certainly might buy a Mustang Lithium.
Yeah, what happened with that?
I think it was kind of a concept car because it was, it was a third-party company that Ford contracted to build it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think that's all their technology, not Ford's. I'm not 100% sure. I didn't talk to the guys. I wrote an article on it, but it was all secondhand information. But that's that kind of stuff appeals to me. But I feel like they're almost alienating some of the core market with their current marketing message. And I'm not a marketing guy, so ignore everything I'm saying. This is, again, my opinion as a car guy that has a bunch of
That looks like for like the big three, right? The big three have always like been back and forth and battled like over like who can build like the most powerful truck with the most towing capacity, or the most powerful sports car with the highest horsepower engine. What does the future hold? Like, is it just going to be a battle of range and like charging time?
I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. I have no idea what the future landscape looks like.
The Mustang Lithium was built by Webasto and Ford. It was created to promote the future of Ford's electrification efforts on the popular muscle car. The Mustang Lithium is powered by an 800-volt Webasto battery and a 5-power dual-core electric motor with dual power inverters. Sounds fast.
I mean, honestly, give me a car that's still fun to drive, and maybe it, the lack of a vroom vroom isn't such a big deal.
Okay, like the noise car makes is important, right? But what I don't understand is like they can make an electric car sound cool. Like, give it some future sound. I don't know, like something that you would hear in Tron.
I just, whenever you say that, I think of the Jetsons.
Well, turbos kind of sound like that, but you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
give them something unique, like a unique part of their soul that people can identify with, right? If you want people to, enjoy them as much as they enjoy classic cars with like the rumble of an American V8 or any other V8, or just even a four-cylinder with a turbo. Like, the cars have iconic sounds, right? And that's part of the character of each car. Why not do that with electric vehicles, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the most identifying things that you can do. And I know that they say like, oh, the only people that like loud cars are the ones driving them. Well, if you want people to buy your car,
yeah, they're the ones that are spending the money, right?
yeah.
I mean, a perfect example. Look at Formula E, right? The electric formula cars. That is so weird to watch because a formula car should have that note, and it's a visceral note. It creates emotion, whether you like it or hate it or whatever. It creates emotion. It's kind of lacking to watch as a spectator in Formula E because
Yeah.
real mild whine and a lot of tire, slipping, chirping.
I was gonna say, but have you seen the video of that Cobra Jet launching?
Yeah, but
it's pretty sick. You just see the tires just roasting.
But do you notice that there's something in the background to stimulate you auditorily? I don't even know if that's a word. I just made that up.
Really?
Go back and watch it. There's like music and sounds and stuff other than the car. It's not just the car.
I wonder if we can find some like raw footage of that thing just launching, because I bet it would sound cool. Just the tires, like
the sounds of that thing are amazing. Like, just from a technical, holy crap, you never get to hear this because there's always engine noises over it. But in that situation, I'm gonna be a total hypocrite here. In a real racing situation, I don't care what the car sounds like. The goal of a race is not to,
still, I'd like to
your car. It's to win.
Yeah, but I'd still like to hear, like, I don't know, like the sound a jet makes when it's about to take off or something,
Well, I mean, and again, internal combustion engine. That's an internal combustion engine.
Yeah. I get it.
But like when I'm cruising my car, like when I'm just out on a drive, I want noise. I don't care if I'm racing. Like
Yeah, it's
racing
part
is
of the
racing, whatever.
experience.
But when I'm cruising, I want sound. Like I enjoy driving around, my slower black car because it sounds good and it makes the right rumbles at the right times, and it's a fun little cruiser. Now, that said, if I'm driving to California, I don't want to take that thing. I want a nice quiet ride. So yeah, if they could just not pretend like people who enjoy driving don't exist, I think that would help. I do feel like they're moving to cars are just appliances, and the iJacks, it's just a car, people. I feel like that's the a really big part of this whole electrification movement. Um,
Well,
if anybody from any electric car company is listening, please don't ignore your enthusiasts. Please. That's all I'm saying.
I'm trying to find this quote from Tim Kuniskis over at Dodge, because it seems they've been like the last holdout, right? They've been the one.
Is his quote, "Hey, I think a Hellcat engine will fit in it."
No, I do love those memes though,
Yeah.
but because it's true, right? Like Dodge is like, they've kind of just, I think they've been trying to fly under the radar, but not really, because they're just cranking out Hellcats like crazy. But yeah, I think they've just been avoiding that conversation. But the other day, he did mention something. I think it was on Twitter or something like that. I think I found it. He says like, the days of an iron block supercharged 6.2 liter V8 are numbered. They're absolutely numbered because of all the compliance costs. But the performance that those vehicles generate is not numbered. Yeah, asserted Division Chief Tim Kuniskis in an interview with CNBC. But so I guess it is on their radar, and maybe they're just taking advantage of the market while they can, because over the past 5 years they've sold over 50,000 Hellcat products, which is insane, right? When you talk about like a high end, like niche market vehicle like that, selling 50,000 units.
It's not an $18,000, neon.
Yeah, dude, you're talking about selling 10,000 Hellcats, whether they be Challenger, Charger, Trackhawk, or otherwise, over the past 5 years. That's crazy, man. 10,000 a year.
When are we gonna get the Hellcat minivan?
No.
Make minivans cool again. Okay, not again, because they've never been cool. Make minivans cool.
I don't know, man, but they
and instead of having bench seats, they could have bucket seats in every position. Have actual harnesses for everybody.
Somewhere a Dodge engineer is having the same conversation.
Well, remember the Caravan that I think it was Nitrous Express's owner had, the 10-second minivan, and it was like,
oh yeah. I know what you're talking about.
I think it was a Dodge, and I think it was Nitrous Express. I'm not 100% sure. It's been a while, but yeah, that let's do that in a production vehicle, please. Thank you.
Well, they've basically just kind of been ignoring this big push, right? Whereas GM and Ford have kind of bent to that will and said like, oh, okay, EVs, like, all right, we're going all in, right? And they got rid of like Ford got rid of the Taurus and like several other economy cars, and now they're just focusing on like trucks, Mustangs, and SUVs, and this big push towards the electrification. GM, obviously, they created an entirely new logo that cost them God knows how much to signify their push to toward EVs. And Dodge has kind of been quiet about this whole thing until now, right? Except for what Tim Kuniskis had to say just the other day.
I still think that's technically being quiet. You know what I mean? I mean, even though he's acknowledging, I think they're still being quiet.
Well, I love it, dude. Kudos to them. That's awesome. And the people want it, right? Like they made 702 Dodge Ram TRX, the Hellcat powered Dodge Ram, and the launch edition, and they sold them all within minutes and that's a $90,000 truck.
Yeah.
So the people want high horsepower, just monster vehicles, but for how long are they going to be allowed to have them? Who knows? I'm not sure, man. I guess as we draw to a close, I pose that question to all of you at home. How much longer are we going to be able to enjoy these, really beautiful high-powered, gas-powered cars? Hopefully for a long time. What do you think, Greg?
I'm going to say it again. I am okay with technology advancing. Just don't take away my internal combustion stuff.
Yeah.
I enjoy my internal combustion engine stuff. Like, it's not even I don't like electric. No, I genuinely enjoy the puzzle of an internal combustion engine. Don't tell me I can't have that. And I'm good. Like, will I own an electric car? I am assuming so, because I don't plan on dying in the next 15 years. I mean, realistically.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to own one. Like, it's going to happen. I hope it's something I enjoy driving.
Listen, everybody at home, this episode has been kind of a fun one. Greg and I have had an opportunity to do a little bit of research on this whole EV thing, done a lot of speculating and guessing and hypothesizing. For those of you at home who have more insight on some of these subjects, please chime in the comments section. Set us straight if we're way off base. Give us support if you think the same way. Let us know how you feel about this whole thing. Drop a comment, give us a like, comment, subscribe, that whole thing. Hit the notification button. Do us a big favor, and go check out our sponsors. I guess with that, Greg, we can sign off. What do you think?
Yeah. Make sure to head over to Engine Labs and check out the cool 460 small block story. That's pretty. I like that.
Yeah. Before we officially sign off here, Greg, what do you have going on enginelabs.com that the people can go check out right now?
We have Jeff Smith's the 10 tips thing. That's anything by Jeff Smith, is going to be good, right?
Definitely.
But then we also have that just went up yesterday when you're watching this. The Prestige Motorsports put together a pretty cool 460 cubic inch small block Ford combo. It's just the dyno test had some surprising results. It's just a cool project. And then also I got a cross from Brian Havens on why the LT is better than the LS. And whether you love them or hate them, they're there. And it does a great job of just, talking about the differences, because the LT is not just an LS with direct injection, like a lot of people think. So yeah, check that out. And just, if you're going to hate it, at least be informed about it to hate it. Right.
Very cool. Well, if all of this EV talk has driven you up a wall and you need to see some good old-fashioned hot rods, go check out streetmusclemag.com. We always have fantastic features and tech articles that you guys can check out. The latest of which was a complete bushing overhaul, body mount, trans mounts, engine mounts, and suspension bushing overhaul on Project C10 that we've been working on. It's an old square body, fantastic little farm truck that's been slammed. Really, really cool. We went over to Energy Suspension for that, and we talked to some of their experts. And then, of course, all kinds of engine tech on enginelabs.com, and basically any automotive affliction that you have, whether that's big lifted trucks, off-road racing, road racing, classic hot rods, LS-powered stuff, Ford stuff. Power Automedia has it. So check out powerautomedia.com and check out all of our titles over there. And, of course, again, give us that like, comment, subscribe. Hit that notification button, and we'll catch you next time at noon Friday. This has been the RodCast. I'm Vinny. That's Greg. Peace out.